Some houses feel safe, until the silence begins to change. Welcome to Mr. Night Spook, where we share true stories that remind you you're never really alone. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? And remember, so many of you watch without subscribing. Don't make that mistake. The next stories will only get scarier. I was halfway through a bowl of cereal when the house went quiet. Fridge motor stopping, vents holding their breath. The wall clock suddenly louder than it should be. In that pocket of silence, the ceiling above the kitchen gave a long, dry creak. Not a pop, a wait. It was supposed to be the easiest night. My parents were 2 streets over at the Hoffman's retirement thing, and I had orders to keep the lights low and the doors locked. I'd done the rounds because Dad would ask later. Front deadbolt firm, back slider latched, windows clamped with the little aluminum stops he swears by. Our cul-de-sac does quiet the way libraries do. Even the feral cat respects after 9. I rinsed the spoon and listened. Another creak, soft and patient, came from directly over the top step. We didn't have pets. The upstairs is 3 bedrooms and a narrow hall runner Mom says keeps the place from sounding empty. The runner sighs when you walk on it. Wood says what you weigh. I took 2 steps toward the stairs, then heard a third creak land and hold the way someone does when they're listening for you to answer. You can talk yourself out of fear until it starts answering back. Old house, I told the clock. Heat, nails, wood. I called Dad anyway. He answered over party chatter and a badly tuned guitar. He didn't mock me. Grab the flashlight, he said. Put me on speaker. Don't go up. I held the beam across the stairs and saw nothing but dust glittering like tiny fish. Then something slid along the upstairs wall. Fingertips over paint, the sound slow and familiar. The way you move in a house you know by heart. A step followed, not searching, not sneaking. Conversational, matching my breath. Police? Dad asked. If I'm calling you, I should call them, I said, and did. The operator wanted my address 3 times, told me officers were on the way and to find a room to lock. Stay on the line, she said. Where are you now? Bottom of the stairs. Do not go up the stairs. Another creak, placed with care on the landing above, disagreed. My phone clicked softly, another line joining the call. The operator's voice went distant for a second. In the space she left, a new sound came on the line. Not a voice, a breath close, unpracticed, like someone learning how by watching. I covered the bottom of the phone and looked up the stairwell as if the sound might be hanging there. I took 1 step. The house answered with a matching step overhead. Not in sync, but in reply. I took another. From above, another. The string on the attic hatch at the far end of the hall, just a little white tail of cotton, moved forward a fraction, as if something had exhaled beneath it, not above. I told myself it was the register. I told myself anything. Officers are 2 minutes out, the operator said. Stay where you are. A text buzzed. Unknown number, stop. Another, half a second later. Don't come up yet. I opened the contact info. It was my own number. That should have sent me outside to sit on the curb and wave at the neighbor's curtains. Instead, I took the rest of the stairs on careful feet, just far enough to see the top landing and the runner's gray diamonds. The bathroom mirror flashed a mean sliver of myself. My bedroom door was open the way I'd left it. My parents' door was shut because Mom believes in a house that looks kept. The hall felt 6 degrees colder near the attic hatch. Something touched the back of my neck. Not a hand, cold air drawn with a purpose. I spun the beam and for a heartbeat the light cut a suggestion out of the dark. The slope of a shoulder, a head bent the wrong way, dust moving like breath. It vanished with the angle of the light. The runner depressed in a long oval, like couch cushions after someone stands. My name came from downstairs, huge and close. Dad at the front door. For a second I believed saying a name made the thing choose. I ran. The pictures on the wall knocked against their nails as I brushed past. The steps behind me didn't chase. They kept pace 1 for 1 like a teacher with a metronome. I hit the floor hard, slid, caught the newel post and found myself in my father's arms. We stood in the porch light while the sirens made everyone in the cul-de-sac pretend to look for something in their garages. The police cleared the house in a way that made me feel stupid, and then worse for wishing they'd been afraid too. They asked about pets and HVAC and raccoons and settling. They pointed at the attic hatch and said air pressure does funny things. One suggested the old runner might hold a shape for a while. You'd be surprised what carpet remembers, he said. When they left, Dad tapped the hatch. It stuck and then broke free with a paint crack. Hot insulation rolled out like a held breath. He closed it fast and tried a smile that didn't belong to the rest of his face. "Sleep in our room tonight," he said. We kept the lights on. I watched the doorway until dawn. In the morning, my phone showed no unknown texts. The call log showed 911 and Dad and nothing else. At school, I told Ethan, and he said what people say when they want to be helpful, and also not walk past your house at dusk. That afternoon, I took the old baby monitor from a garage sale box and pointed the camera down the hallway at the attic string. I didn't tell anyone. At 1:12 a.m., the string moved. Not a sway. A press forward, as if something had come up under it and looked around. The runner darkened in a long oval the camera couldn't quite focus on. My phone was silent except for the faint hiss of the mic. No steps. The house did its best impression of a photograph. The picture fuzzed in a static exhale, then cleared to show everything ordinary again. I watched until the numbers on the screen rolled to tune and hated myself for needing the light on. I deleted the clip in the morning. I told myself it was nothing but a glitch. The truth felt a lot like not wanting proof I'd have to explain to anyone who loves me. 2 nights later, alone for an hour because Mom was at the store and Dad had gone to fix the Hoffman's porch light, the house took that deep breath again. The fridge motor cut, the vents held, the clock spoke up, and above the kitchen the same slow footstep landed on the long plank under my parents' bed. The second came at the top of the stairs. It waited, not hiding, not hurrying. It knew I was listening. I didn't climb. I stood in the kitchen with the light off and the countertop cool under my palms and counted with it. 1 step for 1 breath, the old wood passing the message down. The phone felt heavy. I opened a new text to no one and typed, "I hear you." The dots appeared, steady and gray and impossible. Something changed its weight above me. The ceiling light trembled without swinging. Somewhere in the house, a door we never use eased against its frame like it had remembered how. The first knock was so gentle I almost missed it. Not from the front door, from overhead. Like knuckles tapped to the floor from the other side. 3 small knocks, spaced like someone practicing. You can explain a lot if you want. Houses settle. Ducts click. Carpet remembers. What I haven't been able to explain is how on the second knock, my phone buzzed with a text from a blank gray circle that said, in the exact timing of the sound, "Let me finish." Dad's truck crunched the driveway. The porch light came on in a rush. Whatever stood over me didn't run. It stepped backward, 1 slow, patient step and then another, setting each weight down the way it had put it there, like returning something it had borrowed. The fridge motor started. The vents sighed. The clock went back to being only a clock. We didn't call the police again. There's only so much you can do with men and flashlights and forms. Dad tightened screws that didn't need tightening and pushed on the attic hatch and told me about air pressure again, because it was the story we both wanted to live in. I nodded like a person being told a fairy tale they asked for. Since then, the sound has learned my routines. It waits until the house is holding its breath. It begins where it left off, never at random, as if something upstairs has been keeping place with a finger in the page. Sometimes it's only a step. Sometimes the string on the hatch leans forward the width of a fingernail. Sometimes if I'm on the stairs, it matches me so carefully that I could swear we share a spine. I don't go up when I'm alone anymore. I keep the flashlight in the junk drawer and a lie in my mouth. Last week, the 911 operator called to follow up. "We recorded a second line on your call," she said. I'm sure it was interference, but did you pick up another phone on your end? I told her no. It sounded like breathing, she said, waiting for me to laugh. I didn't. Probably interference, she said again, softer, like working hard at being ordinary. I thanked her like a person who had slept since then. Tonight my parents are home, asleep down the hall, and I am typing this with the screen dimmed. The baby monitor's little red eye pointed at the attic string because it makes me feel like I can see a thing before it sees me. The house has exhaled into that late, soft quiet. In the safe glow of other people existing nearby, it's easier to tell yourself stories that end in science. Upstairs a step lands. It is careful. It is patient. It sounds like someone who already knows I'm listening. I could wake Dad. I could turn on every light and open every door and clap until I scare what can be scared. Instead, I put my thumb over a blank text and type "I hear you" again because it feels worse not to reply. The dots appear. They don't form words. They sit there like a held breath. The next step lands when I would hit send and another follows unhurried, descending to the top of the stairs where the runner begins, where the first creak lives. The baby monitor shows the string lean forward, no wind. I always worked better at the kitchen table. The laminate was warm from years of elbows in coffee mugs. The chair groaned like it knew me, and the house kept time. Fridge cough, clock click, heater ping. Past the back door, the fields were a darker quiet. 2 miles off, trucks slipped the highway like whales under a boat. Statistics sprawled across the table like an autopsy. My plan, work to the hour, tea, cookie, held until I looked up and saw myself in the back door's glass and saw the room behind me hesitate. It was tiny. My head tipped. The head in the glass followed a breath late. A thumbprint of a shape stood behind my shoulder. I blinked and it corrected. The heater sighed and I laughed at myself. Cheap glass, tired brain. I waved a pen. The pen in the glass waved after, not quite agreeing about when. Cool, I said, and the sound of my voice made the kitchen feel both safer and emptier. I stood and turned because that's the dumb law of houses. If something moves behind you, you give it your back to prove you're not afraid. The room was only the room. Chair, cat tower the cat ignored, extension cord like a dropped shoelace. When I faced the door again, the lag was gone, as if scolded. Work then. I pretended the book could bless me. It couldn't. The next time I looked, the kitchen in the glass lagged again. The smear had taller ideas now. It held still the way a polite person holds a door. I reached for the blind. The slats came down crooked, leaving a narrow strip acting like a spy hole. In that strip, my eye blinked late, and a darker strip behind me advanced like a tide while I fussed with my towel. I pulled the blind back up because part of me wanted proof the world still matched. Cold bled through the glass with the porch's weak light. I opened the door and leaned into the night. The stock tank glinted. A dog barked a county away. The sky made no commitments. Behind me, the house breathed. I shut the door and, because I pick at scabs, killed the kitchen light so the glass would be a better mirror. My face hovered there, a campfire story waiting for its bad part. In the dark pane, the smear grew a shoulder. My reflection's mouth moved late, whispering nothing. Down the hall, the light snapped on by itself. I said something wordless and stepped to the doorway. No one was there flipping the stubborn switch. The framed school pictures glinted in tiny moons. Their glass faces were a beat behind too, like I'd arrived a fraction before myself. Back at the door, my reflection waited where I left it, which is not always how reflections behave. The handle in the glass tugged down. Then the real one did, like the glass was training the house. I touched the metal. It was warmer than it should have been. Great, I said, a prayer with no God. I picked up my phone because that's what you do when reality feels loose. Triangulate with a screen. The front camera showed fluorescent honesty. The phone saw no lag. The door did, stubborn and sure. Kara answered FaceTime with a towel on her head in suspicion. What am I looking at? This, I said, and tilted to the door. On screen, my kitchen moved like a kitchen. In the door, my kitchen moved like a memory. Wave, she said, suddenly professional. I waved, the door waved after. The smear behind me took a small step closer and pretended it hadn't. Kara's tone changed. Mia, don't turn around. You have to. The other law, I turned. The room was empty. The microwave's black door held a flattened me with someone important blurred in. The kettle's curve made the thing behind me intimate. The spoon in the sink showed me small and late. I hate this, Kara said. This is a glitch video for people who don't believe in ghosts. Or a haunted double pane, I said. The heater thunked and fell quiet. With the white noise gone, I heard a new sound, a soft peel like skin leaving glass. It came from the door. In the reflection, my breath fogged. The handle in the glass went down one notch, then mine did, as if taught. Stop touching it, Kara snapped, which was funny because the touching was happening to me. Cover it. I dropped the blind. The slats whispered down and the glass went away. Relief felt sudden enough to be shameful. I told Kara I was being dramatic. You always are, she said, but gently. I gathered notes to look like closure. I reached for my water, and in the brushed steel of the fridge, I saw the door bright and naked, blind up, glass exposed. The fridge isn't a true mirror. It keeps ghosts and fingerprints. In that dullness, the kitchen and the door looked realer than mine. A shadow slid across it, no artistry, just advance. The microwave chimed by itself and showed me a patient black window with a kitchen lagging by a heartbeat. The knife block gave me a dozen tiny wrong kitchens where a figure waited behind me politely, the way a good waiter does. I moved into the hall because I didn't know what else to do. The family pictures smiled with late mouths. Little me didn't wave until after I had 8th grade me flashed braces, then remembered her chin. In the dark TV at the end of the hall, something taller than me stood gentle and ready, like a coat someone meant to help me into. It said my name in my voice from the kitchen. Not loud, more intimacy than volume. I froze with my shoulder against the wall. The word fogged the tiny mirror in the entryway. The heater came back and the house exhaled. I went back because I didn't want to, and that's a flavor of bravery. The blind hung at an angle it hadn't. A triangle of glass near the latch remained visible. In it, my face looked a touch too pleased. My reflection lifted its hand. I didn't. My reflection's mouth shaped a word I recognized as mine. The smear stood close enough for breath to fog hair. I grabbed the broom because we own a hammer, but the broom was nearer. I smacked the glass. The sound was 1,000 dinners and arguments vacating at once. The pane cracked, starred, surrendered. Cold came in with an honesty that hurt. The blind rattled like scared teeth. One ragged shard clung near the hinge. In that sliver, the door was still perfect. The girl in it still lifted the broom for a hit that had already happened, laughing like she'd been caught. Behind her, the tall shape tightened its idea of arms. I moved left. My sliver self moved after late. Catch up, I told her, and felt sudden pity for that girl I couldn't synchronize with. On the floor, my phone shrieked Kara's name. I fixed it, I said, and knew from the paper sound of my breath I hadn't. Breaking a mirror doesn't cancel what lives there. It makes more rooms for it. The kettle held a dozen dented doors with someone standing close in each. The microwave presented a whole unaffected rectangle of glass where a shadow brought its face to my shoulder like a secret. The TV, black and white, collected me in a patient figure and seemed, awful thought, pleased. Leave, Kara said. Neighbor, now. It's Mom's car, I said, small and stupid, and then the power went out. The house extinguished like a breath. The porch light failed and the night stepped to the threshold. In that oceanic dark, every reflective thing became a hole with my name on it. When the lights came back a second later, every reflection showed nothing for a blink, like the world's eyelids had come down. In that blank, a pressure change scrolled through me. After the rooms inside the rooms repopulated themselves, but wrong, like a choir put back in a new order. From the broken door came that peal again, small and satisfied. I knew then, not with logic but with skin, that it was never the fields or the night. It was the house. It had watched us for 6 years through every glossy place and had been practicing. It had almost matched me. I backed toward the front door. The oven window held me later than myself with someone patient behind. The hallway pictures flickered different teeth. The entry mirror tried me taller. I opened the door to air that tasted like cold earth. The porch light tried and failed. I looked at myself in the window. I lifted my hand. My reflection lifted hers, then stopped, and then I did. Behind my reflected shoulder, the taller blur became a person shape only enough to press what might have been a palm to the inside of the pane. On the real door, there was only my own print, damp and ordinary. From the dark kitchen, my voice, the exact one I hate in recordings, threaded down the hall. It said, almost tender, home. The timing was a fraction late. I stepped outside. The door swung shut soft as a hand on a shoulder. Through the glass, I watched myself stand there in the kitchen as if I had never moved. Broom still in hand, smile not yet fallen. Something patient and taller fitting itself close around her. The latch clicked, and in the reflection it clicked just after. The house took my shape and completed it. Out on the porch, where there was no glass, I learned how it feels to not have a reflection at all. We replaced the door the next week. The man whistled and blamed double pane tricks. Mom calls it my dramatic period. The new glass shows me immediate and correct. But sometimes at night, when the heat cuts out and the highway hushes, I hear that soft peal from the dark TV, from the kettle, from the mirror by the door. Somewhere in this ordinary house, the rooms are still practicing, catching up, and a version of me is still there in the kitchen where I left her, smiling a little at the moment before the mirror learned to keep time. I took the house-sitting gig because my Aunt Ruth pays in cash and casseroles, and because my student loan servicer has the voice of a man who irons his socks. Ruth's farmhouse sits 10 miles outside a small Texas town where the radio goes to static if you turn your head. She asked me to feed her calico, water the basil, and answer the landline if Mrs. Duarte calls about eggs, as if the year hadn't moved on. I said yes because it felt good to be needed by a house that still remembered how to ring. The place smelled like cedar chests and lemon oil. Floorboards spoke under your feet with the frankness of old people. On the living room wall, a gallery of frames. Uncle Larry with a catfish, a black and white of the farmhouse in winter, a school photo of me at 8 trying to hide a chipped tooth. The landline sat on a side table beside a ceramic rooster that doubled as a weather prophet. I put my backpack down, scratched the cat, Spoons, queen of the cracked windowsill, and tried to study for Monday's exam, telling myself that in this quiet I would finally be the kind of person who reviews flashcards without drifting off into every awful memory that thinks it deserves attention. Night on the flats comes down like a lid. Wind pressed through corn and telephone lines hummed a single tired note. Somewhere out near the county road, frogs warmed up like a choir with no conductor. I made a sandwich, called my mom to tell her I'd made it, and promised not to watch anything scary. I stuck to flashcards. Around 9, my brain turned to oatmeal and I let myself lean back in Uncle Larry's recliner and just listen to the house breathe. The phone rang. One clean bell, then another. Spoons lifted her head and made the sound that means the air is wrong. I picked up on the second ring. "Ruth and Larry's," I said. A man's voice came soft through a thin seam of static. Not young, not old, like a neighbor you can't place. "Evening," he said. "Sorry to bother so late. Is this Ruth?" "She's out of town," I said, already preparing to take a message. "Well, maybe you can help," he said, like we were both smiling. I was just noticing the pictures above the phone. The arrangement changed, didn't it? That fishing photo used to hang lower. You nudged it up a hair. It balances the winter one now. "I like it." I turned without meaning to. He was right. I'd dusted earlier with a dish towel and left the catfish photo a 1/4 inch higher. The winter farmhouse sat slightly crooked, charming if you squinted. My skin cooled. "Who is this?" I asked, aiming for pleasant. "A friend of the house," he said. "It remembers me and you. That school photo? Magnolia behind you, chipped tooth you're trying not to show? You were brave that day. The part of me that writes papers tried to file this as coincidence. The part that lives in a body went still. "If you're selling something," I said, "we're not interested." "Oh no," he said, amused. "I'm already inside. In a city, you'd hang up. In a farmhouse, you try to be polite." I told myself he meant he was on the party line, some tangle of copper older than both of us. I said, "Have a good night," and put the receiver down. From upstairs, a second phone began to ring. I hadn't known there was another. The sound had a higher pitch, timid and far away, but it matched the cadence exactly. 3 chimes, a breath. The ceiling became a map I couldn't see. Spoon slid off the couch and arrowed under the dining chair. I told myself the noise was traveling through pipes or old wood, that houses carry sound like gossip. The upstairs ringing stopped. I laughed once to make the moment behave. Then I found a flashlight and climbed. The third stair squealed. Uncle Larry calls it the burglar alarm. The hallway smelled like cedar and old paperbacks. Doors rested open by an inch. In the last room, a small iron bed, a quilt that remembered every winter, and on a doilied table, a rotary phone the color of bone. Its cord ran directly into the wall like a vein. I put my hand above the cradle, cold as a dish left to dry. I lifted the receiver, dial tone, then a click, and a breath that belonged in the room rather than on the line. "Did you go upstairs?" The man asked, conversational, pleased. "Good. It's important to answer when a phone rings." "It's polite. Who are you?" I asked. The flashlight beam trembled, and I watched it shake in the mirror on the dresser. My face pale, eyes too big, jaw set like a child trying not to cry. "I told you," he said mildly. "I'm in the house." A quiet shift sounded to my right, not from the receiver but from the floorboard near the bed, the settled weight sound of a knee. "There's a scratch on the iron rail," he added. "You put it there when you were feverish, 9 years old." Ruth sat on the edge of the bed and hummed Blessed Assurance until you slept. "You dragged your nail back and forth so you'd leave proof you were still here." I found the scar by feel, thin and true. My stomach dropped like an elevator. No one knew that. I barely remembered telling it to myself. "Get out," I said, surprised at the steadiness of my voice. "I can't," he said, with a weary patience that made my skin crawl. "That's not what houses do." I took the bone-colored phone with me and crossed the upstairs landing. The third stair creaked without my foot on it. Something moved below, air making way for a body or the memory of a body. In the living room, the lamps threw their quiet amber. The downstairs phone dozed in its cradle like a well-fed animal. I kept the upstairs receiver to my ear because I didn't know what would happen if I let the line die. The downstairs phone rang. The upstairs receiver didn't cut out. Landlines are jealous. Only one should live at a time. Both sang. "Answer," the voice said, delighted, as if we were playing a game I'd invented. "It's rude to keep it waiting." My free hand lifted the downstairs receiver. I stood there with a phone to each ear like I was listening to two versions of myself. Static, breath, and underneath it the scrape of a picture frame bumped by a shoulder in the next room. "I'm calling the police," I said. It sounded like a line I'd memorized from a pamphlet. "You won't," he said gently. "You would have to explain the pictures. People do not like to be told that frames remember." A soft chuckle. "Look at the winter one." "Left window." I looked because you always look. In the black and white farmhouse, the far left pane held a smudge I'd always written off as a trick of exposure. Tonight it seemed a shade darker. The blur of someone standing very still in a room with the lights off. My pulse made the glass shine. I told myself I could fix it by balancing the wall. I lowered the upstairs receiver to my shoulder and reached to straighten the fishing photo. "Leave them," he said, not loud. The lamps dimmed a fraction like the house took a breath. The house gets confused when Ruth rearranges. "It calls people back to check. What do you want?" I asked. "To be remembered correctly," he said, almost tender. "To be answered. To not be alone with its pictures." From the kitchen came the soft chuff of spoons making her old lady declaration that a door has opened where no door should open. I turned toward the sound. In the dark window above the sink, I caught a reflection. A tall, ordinary silhouette passing the doorway. The kind of man you would not notice in a pew or a waiting room. My skin prickled with the knowledge that ordinary is what you should fear. Ordinary knows all the routes through a house. The upstairs receiver slid from my shoulder and knocked my hip. I put it back, careful, like repositioning a child. "And if I don't tell her?" I asked, locating a stubborn rock inside myself. "If I move every frame right now?" The room's corners seemed to lean in. "Then it will call until you answer from inside the picture," he said, almost kindly. "It's patient." The line thinned to frog song and electricity. I held both receivers a moment longer, as if kindness could be transmitted back through copper. Then I hung them up very gently. The house clicked in the settling way old houses click when they've heard you and are thinking it over. I sat on the rug with my back to the couch and tried to breathe in a way that didn't invite anything. Spoons came and pressed her face into my shin hard enough to hurt, the feline equivalent of "don't you dare die on my shift." At sunrise, the house looked so harmless it made me angry. Dust floated like honest confetti in the bar of light through the east window. Coffee smelled like forgiveness. I poured a cup I didn't drink. Then, because I am petty and human, I reached up and nudged the catfish photo back down a quarter inch, exactly where it had been before I messed with it. I lifted the winter farmhouse off its nail. The wall behind it showed a bright rectangle, the ghost of years. On the cardboard backing, a yellowed scrap of envelope was taped in Aunt Ruth's neat hand. "Do not move." Under it, in a thinner, older script I didn't know, 2 words. Line 2. I put the picture back exactly where it had been. I straightened the whole gallery until the wall felt level under my eyes. Then I set both phones on their cradles, palm flattened over each as if blessing them. "I'll answer if you call," I said to the room, because sometimes it helps to speak out loud to the thing you are trying not to believe in. But not tonight. Ruth and Larry came home Sunday smelling like church and highway coffee. I told them the basil perked up and Spoons pretended to like me. I told Ruth the nails holding the pictures were loose and the plaster soft, and maybe it was better to leave the frames where they'd settled. She laughed and said she'd always thought the winter one was crooked. She lifted it a hair and put it back. The house made a tiny sound like a throat being cleared. That night in my apartment, my cell rang once from an unknown number and quit. A minute later, my neighbor's phone rang through the wall with the same 3-beat cadence. Reasonable explanations exist. Glitches, crossed lines, pranksters, weather somewhere I can't see. I brushed my teeth with the TV on and told myself I was lucky to live in a building that didn't know my childhood. Sometimes, falling asleep, I practice what I'll do when I house sit again. Let the landline go to the answering machine. Ignore the upstairs ring. If a calm male voice asks about the pictures, Say wrong number and hang up. Do not look at the winter window until you can't help it. Then look fast. What I actually do is keep the promise I made without meaning to. When I'm there and the phone rings, I answer. I say Ruth and Larry's. In the voice Aunt Ruth taught me, the voice that fits the house. If there's only dial tone, I say goodnight and hang up. If a man asks after the frames, I say the wall remembers, and so do I. When the upstairs phone rings at the same time, I hold both receivers and stand between them like the middle of a wishbone, and I wait for the house to choose which version of me it wants to keep. It hasn't chosen yet. That might be mercy, or it might be the worst part. How patient it is, how ordinary. How it will keep calling until one night I answer from the wrong side of the winter glass and see a girl my age looking back. Mouth closed tight over a small, chipped tooth, trying not to smile because smiling makes it real. I left the copy shop late enough that the parking lot had cooled into a pale mirror, and the sky over our subdivision looked like a coin rubbed thumb smooth. Danielle was in Dallas helping her sister with the nursery, so the house would be empty except for the plants and that good patient hum the thermostat makes when it knows you're almost home. I drove with the radio low, shoulders up near my ears from fluorescent lights and the smell of hot plastic, counting the same 6 red lights I always count. By the time I turned onto our street, same brick ranches, same porches where people wave in daylight and vanish at night, I could feel the day loosening like a tie. I wanted water hotter than sense, and 10 minutes where the only thing I had to answer to was gravity. Inside, the house performed its usual trick, shrinking me down to size. Lemon cleaner, a polite hint of laundry, my shoes leaving their small history by the door. I said hey just to set a voice bouncing around the rooms, then went straight down the little hall to the bathroom. Our bathroom is all builder's standard. White tile with a texture like sanded bone, grout the color of pencil lead, a vinyl curtain printed with gray reeds and 3 birds Danielle calls herons, even though they look like question marks with beaks. The tub's caulk peels in little white, curls I swear I'll fix every weekend and don't. Turned the hot tap until the pipes groaned like an old man standing, and steam gave the mirror a white shoulder to lean on. The first breaths you take, under a shower after a bad day, feel earned. Water hammered my shoulders until they dropped where they belonged. The curtain rings squealed a little when I shifted. Rings on cheap metal, a domestic violin. I counted like Danielle taught me for the drive home jitters. 8 in, hold 8 out. Slowing my head to the rhythm of the water. It smelled clean and simple. I remember thinking the house was breathing with me. The fan's mild rattle, a car far away drawing a silver line across the wall. Then I heard another breath that wasn't mine. Not a gasp, not drama. A second rhythm tucked between hiss and drip, steady as sleep. Inhale with a careful catch at the top, exhale like a secret trying not to be heard. I held my own breath to be sure, and the other one kept going, patient. I told myself vent, told myself neighbor's TV, told myself anything that let me stay behind the curtain with the hot water baptizing my stupidity. The curtain rings gave a small scrape like a throat clearing. I pulled the curtain hard and fast because if I was going to be scared, better to do it all at once. The bathroom was its usual, damp and trustworthy. Mirror gone to coin gray fog, towel on its ring. The cheap pink razor Danielle leaves like a warning about complacency. No one there. Only my breath, quick now and bright in the ear. And when I listened like you listen for a drip, the other one again. Not in the room anymore, farther down the hall. When I stepped out, my heel slid half a step on the tile. I looked down. The floor wasn't dotted with random drops. It was marked. 2 wet ovals with a long, narrow arch between them. Heel to toe, smaller than mine, and turned toward the hallway. They led off the bath mat like somebody had stepped out of the tub and set their feet precisely on our tile. A third print lived at the threshold, fainter, a thought not quite acted on. Explanations sprouted like weeds. The plumber last month took his shoes off. Maybe he patted this exact path and the mat had held it like a pressed flower until steam coaxed it back. Or the tile remembers shapes the way cushions remember sitters. Or I was tired and confusing order for water. Down the hall something breathed again. The same slow in and out, not trying to scare me, not trying anything, just there. Hello? I said, like maybe I'd invited someone and forgot. The word came out thin, like it had to travel too far. I grabbed a towel for armor and followed the prince into the hall where our wedding photo and a picture of me with a too small fish watch everyone pass like bored sentries. The breathing waited for me in the bedroom. When I turned the lamp on, the room flattened into sensible yellow. Bed like a dark boat, dresser a rectangle. Closet doors with slats that always look like gills. I stood by the bed and listened to the empty space beside it breathe. Inhale with that tiny catch. Exhale pressed through softness like a hand cupped over a mouth. I opened the closet. Hangers clicked, that dry music of fabric, shoes where shoes go. Danielle's suitcase with a baggage tag still looped through the handle like a white tongue. The smell of clean shirts that never completely dried. Nothing stood there. Nothing crouched under the bed but dust and an orphaned sock and a hair tie with a little gold moon. Fear and embarrassment sit in the same chair and elbow each other. I put on jeans and the copy shop softball t-shirt we lost every game in, then slid aside the coats in the hall and took the aluminum bat we keep like a rumor. Danielle laughs at it. What are you going to do, coach the ghost to third? But the weight in my hands made me honest. I checked the deadbolt set chain across. Windows clicked like polite mouths. In the bathroom, the curtain I'd left open was now closed. I stood with the bat in the doorway, feeling ridiculous and necessary. The rings were quiet. The water had stopped their metronome. The other breath wasn't in there anymore. It rose behind me instead, right at my neck, not touching, just demonstrating it could. I turned so fast the towel I'd forgot to drop slapped my legs. Hallway, family in frames. A soft blue square from the thermostat declaring the climate as if it were in charge. Nothing else. I slept in the car. I told myself I'd just cool off, collect my edges, but I dragged the bat with me and locked the doors, and that made it a plan. The subdivision at midnight looks like a set between takes. I waited for a neighbor with a dog to ask what was wrong so I could say, breathing, and watch recognition dawn. No one came. The hours curved. I caught them in shallow mouthfuls. Twice I woke to the feeling of someone in the back seat leaning close to speak my name, and twice it was only the bat. A dumb silver passenger shining up what little light the moon loaned. In the morning, the house was as simple as a checklist. Tile was tile. Prints were gone. The mirror stayed mirror. I cooked eggs, watered leaves until they lifted their green coin faces, took deep breaths that belonged to me. I told myself I'd been tired. I told myself 2 nights make a pattern and I only had one. Night returned anyway, folding itself through the blinds like it always does, ordinary and unarguable. The second time, the breathing started before the water. I stood naked by the tub, hand on the tap, listening to a calm in and out from the bedroom that braided with the sigh of the vent. I turned the shower on because I needed something loud between me and that sound, and steam stepped close like a friend who means well. When I pulled the curtain in reflex, I found the tub empty and the porcelain damp where my arm had not rested. A half moon of dark slowly lifting away like a cheek leaving a pillow. I texted Danielle. Sound dumb question. Ever feel watched in our bedroom? A minute then. No, you okay? I typed and erased. Long day, I sent. She replied, play music. Helps when I'm alone. I turned the counter radio on and hunted for a station. It never lands on what you want, only what you deserve. The static swelled and softened in a slow rhythm. The room breathed with it. When I turned the radio off, the breathing in the bedroom filled the space the music had made. Grateful and exact. I went to the front door because I had the sudden animal thought that the house needed a choice. Through the peephole, our blank stooped the cone of neighbor light, a moth doing the same mistake again. I felt a tug at the back of my shirt, the kind you get when fabric catches on a handle. Polite, almost apologetic. I stood with my hand on the chain and realized I could leave or stay, and either way the breathing would know where my shoes lived. I opened the door. Night breathed in my face like it had also been waiting. I slept in the Walmart lot under lamps that turn everything into day with a head cold. Dawn came on in grays and little birds. A cleaning crew laughed like spoons in a drawer. Back home, the house was ordinary enough to feel like a trick. I showered because you can't be haunted and unwashed. It's too much to ask of the people you stand next to. Under the water, I listened for it and hated that I was listening. For a whole minute, there was only plumbing and heat. Then the second breath arrived from the hall, faint and patient, as if it had been across the room and had decided gently to come closer. That afternoon, I recorded it. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp off and the closet slats making faint stripes and held my phone up to the dark. On the recording, it sounds like fabric on fabric, like someone smoothing a shirt before they speak. I almost sent it to Danielle and then didn't, because a thing you name too boldly becomes a thing you have to explain. I deleted the file, and the quiet after felt like closing a door on a room you still hear. Danielle came home Sunday. She touched my forearm in the dark around 3 and whispered, "You're doing that breathing again?" "That's not me," I whispered back, which is not what spouses say if they want a comfortable marriage. We lay there hand in hand, counting like kids, matching our chests to the low pace beside the bed, which slowed when we slowed and sometimes led us a half beat ahead, like a partner teaching steps. In the morning she said, "Maybe it's the AC," and we both laughed because the AC doesn't leave wet prints on tile. We didn't make rules, but we have them now. We keep the radio on low at night so the house has something decent to practice with. We don't close the bathroom curtain all the way. We don't say the obvious names because names make invitations, and I don't want to learn what it would do with a proper one. Some mornings there's a single damp hand mark on the closet door at the height of a face. Some nights I feel the mattress take a polite weight at the edge, like someone has sat down to watch us sleep and decided, generously, not to. I tell myself it's air and settled boards and 2 tired people primed by stories. I tell myself it's stress and bad lighting and the ordinary mistakes of old houses. Then I wake and the breathing is right between us, close enough to fog my courage, and I know that explanation is just another word for light switch. What we have is a roommate who doesn't need a room. It shares our air. It's patient. It's learning our names by listening to how we say them in our sleep. Last night I heard it in the hall near the front door, as if it were practicing seeing us out. A small turn of the chain, the creak of paint when wood and weather argue. I lay there and counted, 8 in, hold, 8 out, and it matched me, then let me lead. When it stopped, the silence was not relief. It was a question without a mark. I waited for an answer that didn't come, then smiled because sometimes you need to pretend you're brave for the walls. "Good night," I said into the dark. Something in the doorway inhaled like it was about to speak and changed its mind. Then the house breathed me in, and the house breathed me out, and I understood that whatever it is, it has all the time in the world. So we sleep with the radio on and the curtain cracked and our hands threaded on the sheet between us. And when I wake to the soft, steady sound of someone else living in our air, I count with it like prayer and let it count me back. Babysitting my little brother used to be the easiest job in town. Pizza, half-finished homework, cartoons humming low until he drifted off. Our house was old and sighing at night. The hallways were narrow as throats, the paint tired, the bulbs the cheap yellow kind that turns everything tea-colored. "It'll stick," Dad said about the spare room when he was in a mood to be helpful. "Old porcelain knob. Don't mess with it." Mostly he wasn't helpful, just specific. Mom was the one who repeated it every time she left the house. "No friends over, check Dylan's inhaler and don't open the spare room." She said it like don't run the oven. That door had been shut as long as I could remember. It was a Friday, their church fundraiser night. Crockpots, raffle baskets, weak coffee. 9 at the latest, Mom said, checking lipstick in the entry mirror. She kissed my cheek, sniffed Dylan's hair, and added the spare room line, smiling like it was a joke. When the car left, the house settled. The dishwasher chugged. Dylan breathed under his dinosaur quilt. The first bang was little enough to be an excuse. A book falling. A cabinet sighing shut. I looked up from my phone and listened. The air was warm, quiet. The second bang took the excuse away. It came flat and open-palmed from the hallway, steady enough to stand the hair on my arms. "Dylan?" I said automatically, even though the sound hadn't come from his room. I stood and looked down the hall at the spare door, its porcelain knob milk-white. "Hello?" I said, which was stupid. "Mom?" The door said nothing until it didn't bang-bang. Each hit came harder, undecided between asking and demanding. I stepped closer. The knob was cool and slightly damp, like a sweating glass. "Look, if an animal got stuck, I'll call someone," I said. "Raccoon, cat, possum." In my head, there's always a reasonable thing first. My palm left a dark print that faded. The next sound wasn't a bang. It was a set of taps, polite and measured. Tap, 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 tap. I didn't hear my name in it until the spaces widened and slowed. Keeley. It did it again, more certain, Lee. No one calls me Kelly, I'm Kel to everyone. I stood there with my heart too high and said, very funny. The keyhole was a black mouth. An eye behind it, no. From Dylan's room, a wet cough. Duty cut through fear. I hurried in, found him sprawled under the quilt, mouth open in a little moon, inhaler exactly where I'd left it. He didn't look like someone who had just called my name from behind another door. The dinosaur nightlight turned his face orange. It's okay, I said to him, and maybe to myself. Behind me, the knob on the spare door turned. Not fully, just a slow quarter, metal tongue scraping the strike plate, then back. Somehow worse than the banging. I stepped into the hallway and tried to borrow my mother's tone. Stop it. The knob stopped. I moved closer. A hairline crack veined the porcelain. The baseboard showed tiny crescent dents, spoon taps worn into wood. I wrapped my fingers around the knob and tried. It gave a quarter turn and stuck, exactly as Dad had promised. See? I told the door, as if we were doing an experiment together. It stuck. From the other side, a mirrored quarter turn answered. Someone practicing. The hallway's vanilla cardboard scent deepened into something wetter, like a forgotten towel. The house wasn't just remembering. It was sweating. No bars. My text to Mom and Dad just spun. I set the phone down, pressed my ear to the wood. At first I heard only my own breath. Then a whisper made of two rooms rubbing together said, Kel Lee. The P in help that followed warped, like something shaping itself through grain. I jerked back. Who are you? I asked. A pause opened. In it lived the hum of the fridge, the dishwasher's tick, the clack of the neighbor's gate. Then the voice said a single word, wrong and right at once. Sister. It said it like a mouthful. I looked toward Dylan's door and felt a dumb, dangerous hope. Say my name, I whispered, and the door performed our silly 4-knock code from when he was little. Tap, 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 pause, tap. The last knock barely landed. The tiny old voice in my skull, the oven-hot, crosswalk careful voice, said don't. I listened and went to the junk drawer. I found a bobby pin and a stubby flathead. If there's a raccoon, I'm going to hate this. I told no one and worked the pin until the tongue shivered. The knob turned a quarter, then another grudging notch, then with a tiny pop all the way, the latch slid. The door didn't swing open heroically. It eased, stopped, as if a palm braced it. I pressed my shoulder to the paint. Move back, I said, because that's what you say to children and animals and apparently doors. Pressure faded. The gap widened to a handspan, then more. Inside was almost dark, lit by the hall's tea-colored spill. I saw a narrow bed, a nightstand, faded tulip wallpaper. The air was damp-edged with a sweetness. Hello? I said, and then something leaned to my ear from behind me and used Dylan's fever voice. Kel, I turned too fast. No one stood there. The air wavered the way heat wavers above a grill. In that wobble, the idea of a head, a suggestion of breath. Inside, the darkness gathered into the corner. Child height, then smoothed like hands passing over water. On the nightstand sat a carved wooden horse I recognized from Grandpa's box, its ear shiny where a thumb had loved it. Beside it, a cloudy glass jar held a curl of hair, yellowed to honey. The hair matched Dylan's when he was little. Something old in me bent at the sight. Please, the room said, and this time the word sounded like me with strep, ghosted around the edges. I put my hand out. The cold of that air was like touching coins. Behind me, a floorboard popped, the one that always pops near the bathroom. I didn't turn. Where are you? I asked, and the not-quite breath said, Here, the sound sliding between registers. Knowing felt better than not knowing until it didn't. I opened the door wider. Nothing moved, yet the air shifted as if something stepped away. The bedspread smoothed itself into a quiet. From Dylan's room, a window sash whispered. I would have sworn that window was shut. I went to check. Dylan's bed held only the warmth of him, a shape fading. His inhaler had rolled to the carpet. The curtains breathed with an inch of open window I hadn't opened. Outside, porch lights pooled on lawns. Somewhere a train blew a low, patient note. On the sill, 4 dust-free crescents showed where small fingers leaned. Dylan? I said to the porch light. Nothing answered, not the dog, not the moths, not the train. The spare room door behind me clicked softly, like a mouth making up its mind. I ran back. Inside, the jar with the hair gleamed. The carved horse looked in no direction. The room felt occupied. Give him back, I said, which was what I believed. The air grew colder. A small shoulder suggested itself in the corner. The not voice said, "Stay," then less sure, "Sister." The front door latch chirped. The deadbolt rolled. Cold air slid down the hall. Mom's voice arrived, bright with Raffle 1 victory. "We're home!" "Did he go down okay?" I had one hand on the spare door. I pulled it shut. It came easy, gentle as a yawn. The latch settled with a swallowed click. I walked toward the ordinary part of the night, blinking hard. Dad set his keys in the dish. His shoes had a scuff. Mom's lipstick had smudged. I kissed them both, told them Dylan was sleeping, used a voice that sounded exactly like mine. We checked. Dylan on his back, breathing steady, inhaler on the nightstand. He looked solid and small, the way kids do when grown-ups are watching. In the hallway, the washer bulb buzzed and burned steady. The spare door sat in its place like a painting of a door. "You didn't go in there, did you?" Mom asked, casual as frosting. "It's piled with junk." "No," I said. The lie fell out clean. "Why's it always locked?" "It sticks," Dad said from the kitchen. He didn't look at me. Mom did for a long second. She pressed my shoulder. "Some doors stay shut," she said, soft. "You sleep better that way." I lay awake and watched the ceiling. The house did its settling clicks. Down the hall came a soft, careful tap. Then another. Then our old 4-beat knock, so faint you could call it pipes. I got up anyway. The hallway air felt a degree colder. I put my hand on the porcelain knob with the hairline river and held it there a long time. From the other side, the knob turned a quarter and back like tireless practice. Kali, the tap spelled patient as lessons. I could wake my parents and tell them about the jar, the window, the word sister. Instead, I stood in the yellow glow and listened. Behind me, Dylan rolled and gave a tiny off-key sigh like when he was 2. The sound came from where he should be and somehow from farther away, like down a pipe. I didn't open the door again. I stood there until the tap stopped and the knob rested. In the quiet, the house felt like a person holding a breath. I went back to bed and dreamed of our hallway pictures, every frame with the spare door closed. Near dawn came one click, tongue against teeth. The knob turned a quarter and back. A whisper, maybe wind, threaded the wood. "Good. Night," it said, shaped carefully as if the house had practiced. I lay there and told myself the word was nothing. Then I told myself it was something I could keep. Either way, morning would find the door where it always was. Shut, obedient, patient, with time to learn the rest of our names.